Hello everybody, I'm Miss Lisa, and welcome back to another episode of ARTREE Goes Almost Live. Today I'm going to start you on a series about color. Color is one of my favorite things about art. I absolutely love working with color, and today we are going to start out at the beginning, which is we're going to be working with our primary colors, yellow, red, and blue. Now, if you go back to the color wheel that we made, let's take a look at our color wheel. And we marked our primary colors with a P. So here's our yellow, P for primary, our red, P for primary, and our blue, P for primary. And with those three colors, we're going to make a piece of art. This is similar to the artwork that was produced by a Dutch artist named Piet Mondrian. He's a very interesting artist. He was born in 1872 in the Netherlands, and he died in 1944 in New York. He also spent time in Paris, and during all of these places that he lived, his artwork was changing. It started out very representational, meaning that he painted things that looked like what he was seeing. He started out painting landscapes of the Netherlands. He would be painting scenes of windmills, rivers, and fields, trees that looked like trees. Eventually, though, he became what is called an abstract artist. You might remember Kandinsky. We talked about Kandinsky. And the artwork was much less about what he was seeing and much more about lines and shapes and colors. Now, for Piet Mondrian, he particularly loved vertical and horizontal lines. He worked with the colors red, blue, and yellow. He also worked with white, black, and gray during this time. But this lesson is about primaries, so we're mostly going to be concerned with the red, yellow, and blue, and the horizontal and the vertical lines, which we're going to place with a black crayon. We can either add color with a crayon, or we can add color with watercolor paints. And as I love to use watercolors, I will show you how to color this painting with watercolors. But if you're interested to see how it would look with crayon, you can see it would be something similar to this. So if you only have crayons, as long as you have crayons that are in black, yellow, blue, and red, you'll be able to follow along and do this project with me. So we're going to need a piece of paper, and we're going to start out by making some lines. Let me show you what else we're going to need. You might want your color wheel for reference, although it's not really necessary for this class. We will certainly be using it for the next classes. You may want a ruler. Normally, I wouldn't use a ruler, but because we're working with vertical and horizontal lines in the style of Mondrian, we might want to use a ruler for older kids or for adults. This works beautifully with the ruler. If you have younger kids, I do this class with kindergartners all the time. They don't need to use a ruler. It's fine just to use crayons and to draw horizontal and vertical lines as well as you can. In fact, this is the class that I would use to introduce horizontal and vertical lines to kindergartners. Now, I'm also going to be using my mechanical pencil today. Normally, I wouldn't use my mechanical pencil because I would be drawing in more of a sketchy style. Like when I was showing you how to draw fruit, we were looking at what shapes we're seeing and we are drawing without the need for an eraser. But today, again, because we're working with the style of Mondrian, we might want to be a little bit more exact if you are older. If you are younger, it's absolutely fine. You do not need an eraser. Now, you also might want a piece of paper towel if you are using the ruler, and I will show you why in a little bit. You will also want to use crayons to color your shapes or watercolor paints. Again, we're only concerned with primary colors today. So let's get started. We are going to lay down some horizontal and vertical lines. And we're going to be thinking every time we put a line on the paper, how is that line relating to the rest of the lines on the paper, and also to the squares and rectangles that we will make when our lines start crossing over. We want to be thinking about the spaces between the lines, what they look like. Do we need to add more lines to cut them up into smaller pieces, or does it feel good just the way it is? So let's start with a horizontal line. And at the beginning, we're going to be making lines that go all the way across the paper, either in the horizontal direction or in a vertical direction. But let's start here. And again, you do not need to do this with a ruler. Okay, I'm going to make one horizontal line, and then I'm going to make one vertical line. So let's think about what we've made. We've got a large rectangle, two more rectangles, and something that looks similar to a square. And now let's make another horizontal line. Let's try about here. We don't want them all to look the same. Let's try this. And when I'm drawing my lines, I'm actually mentally measuring this space here against this space here to see if I'm getting a line that looks somewhat horizontal or vertical. And I think I'll put another vertical here. So again, I'm measuring this space mentally to this space to see if my ruler is vertical. If I drew this line, you can see it would not be vertical. This space is much shorter than this space up here, which tells me I need to change my ruler's angle so that it makes a nice vertical line. Okay, so I put down two horizontal lines and two vertical lines. And the next lines I'm going to draw are not going to go all the way across the paper. I'm going to put my ruler here, and I think I'm going to do now a horizontal line that's going to start here and go to the edge of my paper. Likewise, if I turn my ruler in the vertical orientation, maybe I'll move it over here so that the width of this rectangle is going to be wider than this one. I'm trying to make some variation. So if I put this here, and I'm mentally measuring this space to that space so I know my ruler is somewhat straight, maybe I will start this line here and go to the edge of the paper. So these two lines both start from a line that I've already drawn. In this case, this line starts from this line and it goes to the edge of the paper. In this case, this line starts from this horizontal and it goes to the edge of the paper. Now let's see if we can make a few more lines like that. I'll put my ruler here, and I think I'm going to make I'm going to work on this side of the ruler now, and I'm going to make a line that comes from the edge of the paper and stops here, or you could say it starts here and goes to the edge of the paper. And I'm going to come down here and make a line. I could say it starts here and goes to the edge of the paper. And every time I make a line, I'm thinking about the shapes that I'm making. So let me try here. I'm going to make some very skinny rectangles. And I think I'm going to make a horizontal line here that starts at this line and ends at that line. I'm going to do one that starts at this line and goes to the edge of the paper. It's made these very thin rectangles. And remember that you do not have to make the lines in the same places on your paper. Start out with some long lines that go from edge to edge, like my first 4 lines. And then start making shorter lines that start at a line you've already drawn and end either at a different line that you've already drawn, or end at the edge of the paper. I think I'll make a couple more right here. Put one there. And I think I'm going to put a short line right here. That will just give us 2 extra small shapes, almost a square, and this rectangle here. And I'm just going to think about how that feels. That feels pretty good to me. It feels somewhat balanced. I think I'll go with this. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to trace over these lines with a black crayon. And the reason I'm using a crayon, Mondrian would have, of course, painted these lines, but I want to use something waxy so that if my watercolor paints go onto the black, it does not move the black. If I used watercolor paint, remember we were talking about how the water moves the paint. So if I make my lines all with watercolor paint, and then I get too close to those lines, say with the yellow paint, some of the water from the yellow paint is going to move some of the black into the yellow. Like when we were painting the fruit and we got those beautiful blended colors on the pears. I don't want to do that in this case. I want my yellow to be bright in yellow, and I want it to stay where the yellow is put. So I'm using a black crayon to make the lines between the colors, or between the parts of the paper that will stay white. Now I'm leaving a little bit of space because this is such a large, thick crayon, and as you can see, it's very dull. I'm going to be going along the edge of my ruler. And if you're not using a ruler, that's fine. You don't need to do this with a ruler. Like I was saying, smaller kids can do this without the ruler. Just remember that the horizontal lines are the lying down lines, like this one, and the vertical lines go this direction. Somehow it's easier to visualize if we call these the standing up lines and the horizontal lines the laying down lines. Now I told you I was going to show you what I have this piece of paper towel for. After I make a line with the black crayon, I'm just going to run it on the paper towel, run the edge of the ruler along the paper towel, and that will pick up any extra bit of black crayon. And that way I won't end up with little bits of black all over this painting. And again, I'm leaving a little bit of space between the ruler and that pencil line because my crayon is very fat and dull, and that way I can run it along the ruler and it will be somewhat where I think it should be. So I'm just going to run the crayon along my horizontals first, or you can do this any way you like. Maybe you want to go horizontal, vertical, horizontal, vertical. Mondrian is very well known for these paintings in primary colors. And like I was saying, some of his works include gray, and sometimes some of the rectangles are painted black. But once you realize which paintings are his, they're very easy to spot in books and in art galleries that happen to have these primary colored Mondrian paintings. Artists often work in a studio. That is a place where they are able to put their paints and unfinished paintings and things that they're working on and all their drawing supplies, and keep them all in one place so that when they want to paint, they can go right to their studio and get to work. And Mondrian had a very interesting studio. He set it up with colored pieces of construction paper in, of course, the primary colors, and also gray and black and white. And he moved these pieces of paper around his studio so that the colors changed. And he was able to be inspired by, I think, the different look at different times. Maybe that wall had red squares on it one day, and maybe the next day there was red and yellow. Maybe there was a splash of blue over here. I think it sounds like a really fun place to do art. Okay, so here we've got some lines, vertical lines and horizontal lines only. And just like when we did the Kandinsky painting, we realized that when the lines cross over each other, they make shapes in between. And so Mondrian's paintings are pretty much made up of rectangles and squares if you look at the shapes, because you can't make much else with only horizontal and vertical lines. So every time they cross over, you've got a shape. Here we've got a rectangle. That's pretty much a square. This one's pretty much a square versus some more rectangles. Square, rectangle, rectangle, square. And what we're going to do now is we're going to add color. And we want to move the color around. We don't want only yellow here when we have these beautiful squares and rectangles. Maybe yellow, maybe blue, maybe red. And we're going to leave white as well. Instead of painting every square a primary color, we're going to leave white. White and black were very important to Mondrian in his paintings. So, because we're using yellow, as you probably know by now, Miss Lisa will want you to start with yellow. And we're going to go round and round and round in that yellow. And we are going to make a very, very yellow color. We're going to resuspend a lot of the pigment. Remember, the pigment is the part of the paint that gives it the color. Get a little bit more water there. We're going to go round and round and round so we can resuspend a lot of the pigment so that we will have a very intense yellow on our paintbrush. And I'm going to look around and decide where I want to start. I think I'm going to paint this square shape here yellow. Now, because I've used a black crayon to outline, well, to make this shape, it doesn't matter if I paint on top of the black because the black pigment is not going to move. The crayon will stay where it's put. I'm gently pulling that color along. A little bit more water, a little bit more pigment. Okay, so I've painted this shape, which is very nearly a square, yellow. And then I'm going to look around and think, what else do I want to have yellow? I might paint 3 or 4 shapes yellow. I probably wouldn't paint this one yellow because it's directly opposite that one. Maybe I'll paint this one yellow. Kind of want to move things around a bit. Don't want the yellow next to its neighbor. Don't want 2 yellow shapes next to each other. And I also don't want to have them completely opposite each other. I want this to kind of, the colors to intersperse so that not all the yellows together. I want maybe yellow, red, and blue in different areas. I think I'll put yellow here. I've got yellow, 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 and I'm thinking maybe I'm going to make this very large corner piece yellow as well. Okay, after I painted my pieces yellow that I want to be yellow, I'm going to rinse out my brush, and I'm not going to go back into the yellow now, because if I go into the blue or the red and then decide I want to go back into the yellow, it's going to be very hard to get the leftover blue or red out of my brush to go back into the yellow without then mixing those 2 colors into my yellow I'm going to have to instead rinse my brush out super well, wash my brush out super well after I paint, before I can go back into the yellow again. So I'm just not going to. I'm going to stop with the yellow now, and I'm going to go into the red. And I'm going to go round and round and round in that red. I want to have a nice bright red. And I'm going to think, where's that red going to go? I think I need some red here. Remember, pull the color gently. There's no need to scrub the brush into the paper. This looks like a good place. I think I'm just going to do 3 of my shapes in red, because red is a very strong color. And I think I'll do 3 of my shapes in blue, and then we'll have a look. So into the blue, round and round and round. I think this piece is a good one for blue. So I'm moving around my painting. I'm going to put some blue here. And I feel like I need some blue down in this corner as well. I think maybe not all the way in the corner. I'm going to put it here. Okay, so let's look at what we've got. We have a lovely, bright, primary colored painting with some white rectangles and squares. We've got rectangles, we've got squares, and we also have, there's a little square there. We have lots of white rectangles, a few white squares, and we have primary colored rectangles and squares. Very Mondrian. This is a great project to do with young kids. Like I mentioned before, they love to paint, and with only 3 colors, as long as they start with yellow, it works very well. You'll want to make sure the brush is very clean, the yellow is very clean to start with, and then just let them paint the yellow pieces, and then no more yellow. Go on to the red and the blue, and just enjoy the beauty of the piece of artwork when you're done. How something so simple can yet feel so good. It is a solid piece of work. It feels like it has a strong structure because of those vertical and horizontal lines, especially black. It feels very strong. And then it's just interspersed with all these bright colors, the primaries. And like I was saying before, when we did the color wheel, we know those primaries are very important because with those primary colors, you can mix, theoretically, any other color. We'll have a look at that as we continue in this series of painting demos, the series on color. Next week, I'm going to talk about secondary colors. So let's move Mondrian aside for the second and take a look at our color wheel. Next week, we're going to be looking at the secondary colors, green, orange, and violet. Remember, we put a little S next to them, so we remember that those are our secondary colors. The secondary colors are made by mixing our primaries together. So to get violet, we're going to mix red and blue, and our color wheel tells us it's going to be violet because that is the secondary that is in between red and blue, violet. If we mix our primary yellow with primary red, it's going to make secondary color orange. If we mix our primary yellow and our primary blue, we're going to make the secondary color green. So next week we're going to do a painting of tulips in a vase, and the tulips are going to be orange and violet, and they are going to have green stems and leaves. So this is going to be a painting using secondary colors only, just like today we did a painting in primary colors only. The week after that, I'm going to be talking more about complementary colors. I was telling you when we finished the still life of the fruit in the bowl that orange and blue are my favorite complementary color combination. Complementary colors lie across from each other on the color wheel. We also had red-violet and yellow-green, and we had green and red in our still life as well. So we're going to be taking a more in-depth look at complementary colors next after we work on the secondary color painting. And to finish off this series, we're going to be looking at tints and shades. And in the very last class in this series, I'm going to show you how to mix as many colors as I can. We are going to be thinking about how we're going to use the color wheel to help us mix any color that we want to mix. And we'll see how that goes. We can mix a lot of different colors. Until then, I want to wish you peace and safety and creativity. Keep doing art and keep enjoying yourselves while staying safe inside. And let's get through this together. We are going to be fine. Thank you for watching, and until next time, goodbye.